The saints who were friends of God had peace of conscience even when they were persecuted, even when they had to suffer many outrages, and some of them even had to part with their lives. We can surely expect that in our own lives there will come a time when we must make a choice between being loyal to the true faith or of giving allegiance to something else which is either opposed to or not in alliance with our faith.
While not yet a saint, the cause for the canonization of Father Kapaun, or often pronounced Capon, has been fought for in the last few decades. The story of an ordinary man, hailing from the middle of nowhere Kansas and serving in the Korean War, resonates with many throughout the world, to the point where there is significant effort to officially recognize him as a resident of heaven. So how does a humble priest from Kansas become a war hero recognized around the world? And how does the ordinary man or woman become a saint? Pilsen, Kansas is an unassuming town in the eastern central part of the state. It is currently home to a population of about 65, consisting of a few houses and one church. On April 20th, 1916, Emil Joseph Kapaun was born in this tiny city to his parents, Enos and Bessie. Emil was born in his home's kitchen, which was connected to the family's 160-acre farm. With one other brother, Eugene, the German Bohemian family enjoyed a simple life, working hard on the farm, living together as a community, and, as faithful Catholics, attending Sunday Mass every week.
All of his community was here. His family, his friends, the neighbors. The Catholic Church was pretty much it. I think most all of the community was Catholic. So for him, this would have been the hub, so to speak.
Emil was especially known to be a kind, well-mannered boy. He loved his family, the outdoors, and working with his hands, making him a strong and willing worker, as well as crafty and efficient. He was known for his quiet, observant behavior, as well as his sharp sense of humor.
I mean, in small towns, just as humans anywhere, but especially small towns, we're just constantly telling stories about each other. And so when I hear people telling stories about Emil when he was a boy or a teenager, it's just like I'm hearing stories about the dude who sits in the fourth pew on Sunday morning.
Emil was taught by nuns from his time in elementary school to 10th grade, and was raised to have a deep and honest devotion to the Catholic faith. It was this strong devotion that led him to attend Conception Seminary in Missouri, discerning a call to the priesthood at only 14 years old in 1930. He began his actual studies to become a priest in 1936 at Kenrick Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri, where he was formed with other seminarians on theology and the liturgy of the church. Emil was ordained a Catholic priest in the Diocese of Wichita on June 9, 1940 in St. John's Chapel in Wichita, Kansas. Father Kapaun celebrated his first Mass as a newly ordained priest in his home church, St. John Nepomucene, back in Pilsen, with roughly 1,200 attendants. It was this same church where Kapaun was first assigned to as an associate pastor, where he fulfilled his priestly duties, serving the small community and helping lead them in their spirituality.
Well, everything that happened in Emil's life, from his baptism, happened in this church, with the exception of Holy Orders, which was done in Wichita.
However, when Bishop Christian Winkleman assigned him as an additional auxiliary chaplain of the Army base stationed in Harrington, Kansas in 1943, Father Kapaun felt a great calling to serve the men in military situations. After repeatedly asking Bishop Winkleman, Kapaun was finally granted a position on the U.S. Army Chaplain Corps in 1944. First stationed in Georgia, Kapaun was eventually deployed overseas in March of 1945 to both Burma and India, serving towards the end of World War II. As a military chaplain, Father Kapaun's duties included providing the Catholic sacraments to his men, giving last rites to those who were wounded or ill, and tending to physical needs of soldiers who were in pain. By jeep, he often had to travel thousands of miles through rough terrain to reach the men on battlefields, and it was this consistent commitment to his duties that earned him the title of captain on January 3, 1946. While his time in World War II proved to be a tough commitment, it was his future deployment that would cement his story and launch his cause for sainthood. After visiting Pilsen for the last time in his life, Father Kapaun was stationed in Yokohama, Japan in 1950 with the post-World War II Peacekeeping Corps. While performing regular duties and assisting with occasional military events, the Korean War began when North Korea invaded South Korea on June 25, 1950. Kapaun and other men were sent to the South to assist as some of the first American troops involved in the war. It was apparent to Father Kapaun that very shortly, his men would be engaged in combat. The conditions were brutal. The Korean atmosphere was hot and wet, filled with mosquitoes and heavy rainfall, and the horrors of war were ever present. Men were killed, brutally wounded, shell-shocked, and traumatized on the daily. Father Kapaun was a first-hand witness to all of this, and worked towards being a guiding light to those who needed it. He often would risk his life for the sake of his men, running onto front lines to retrieve injured men, give last rites, and praying with soldiers in the foxholes were among his habitual practices. He often would celebrate Catholic Mass on the hood of his Jeep dangerously close to the battlefield, tending to any soldier's devotion to the Catholic Eucharist. Kapaun would also consistently bury the dead on the battlefields.
There are stories of him helping North Korean injured soldiers, the enemy, risking himself to go and pull an enemy away from combat who was injured and to help tend to that enemy's wounds.
The fact that Father Kapaun had lived as long as he had up to this point is astounding. There were many times that he just narrowly escaped death. In one instance, his smoking pipe was shot from his mouth by a sniper on enemy territory.
He almost just got shot, and he's just cheesing it with an incredible a delight in life and a certainty and a power over death, which gives one the ability to not let the bastards get them down. He would regularly say, "Illegitimi non carborundum," which is "don't let the bastards get you down."
When China unexpectedly entered the war on November 1st, Father Kapaun's camp was invaded and surrounded by Chinese soldiers. He continued his work tending to the sick and dying through this combat, but was eventually captured when he had decided to remain on the battlefield, regardless of the newfound danger. Kapaun and the other men at his encampment were now officially prisoners of war. The U.S. soldiers were marched almost 100 miles to a prison camp at Pyeongtaung, struggling through the bitter cold that they were not properly prepared for.
So the march tended to be probably one of the most miserable times those men have. And -20s, it was one of the coldest winters in history that Korea had had. And so as they're doing this march, a lot of men are dying, and a lot of them are being shot because they're not keeping up, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And during this time, he walks away from that and buried Kenneth Hyslop. And I think, he gave him a Christian burial, he did prayers over him before he got back in that line and marched again.
The men were then instituted as prisoners of Pyeongtaung. Father Kapaun did not skip a beat in serving his men in the camp.
When they got there, it was an old, small village. And one of the first things he realized was that they were drinking the water that they were bathing in and animals were in. Body lice becomes an issue. And pneumonia, of course. Rations were millet and crack corn. He was sneaking out, trying to find food for the others. He was nursing men. He was going from building to building, trying to just be there for them. So he took on probably more than any of the other men did, but that was just who he was.
They had the guards who would have to try to brainwash the soldiers to see the world as the communists see it. Well, the soldiers still stayed strong and were having it, and so they would get threatened. At one point, they were getting threatened by this guard, and Emil said loud enough for the other soldiers and for the guard to hear, "That son of a bitch." And even that statement alone, how helpful that would have been for his friends, his soldiers at the time.
Father Kapaun kept the faith alive in these men through his acts of service and through his constant encouragement of the men. He kept their hope alive as well. There's evidence that in the prison camp where Father Kapaun served, the death rate of the prisoners in that camp was significantly lower than it was in other similar camps in the area. And that death rate being lower than the others was attributed to Father Kapaun and the hope that he gave to the men.
Serving the prisoners took a serious toll on Kapaun's body, however. In early 1951, he had suffered both pneumonia and a blood clot in his leg, leaving him immobile in order to let it heal. The Chinese soldiers took note of this and took him out of his hut to move him to the camp hospital, where ill prisoners were actually just left to die. His men fought back, refusing to let the captors take him, but Kapaun insisted that they let him be taken.
Some of his last words says, like, the guards were taking him away to the hospital, and he said, "Tell my bishop I died a happy death." Death is horrifying, you know? And here's a man saying, tell my bishop I died a happy death.
Father Emil Kapaun died a few days later on May 23, 1951. His remains had gone missing, and all that remained of him in the camp were the stories, morale, and hope that he had given his fellow prisoners. Nearly 2.5 years after Father Kapaun's death, the men were freed from the war camp in Pyeongtaung and were released back home to the United States. Countless soldiers had survived due to the witness that Kapaun had bore, as well as his continuous practice carried out by the remaining men, soldiers who otherwise would have died a long time ago in Pyeongtaung.
So the canonization process is long and very detailed in a lot of ways. It starts, with the faithful, with a recognition of holiness. And then we send all that to Rome, and there's historians that take a look at it, there's theologians that take a look at it, and then there's a set of bishops that vote on it, and then the Holy Father has the final say, and that's just to name him venerable, which is kind of the more or less the first step.
One of the things I think that is probably the most poignant and meaningful events that has happened since the cause has been opened has been the recovery, the identification, and the return of Father Kapaun's body, his earthly remains, home here to Wichita. It was not really ever thought that we would ever be able to recover his body. When Pope Francis died, one of the last official acts that he did as Pope was to declare Father Kapaun venerable.
So it goes servant of God, venerable, blessed, and saint. Blessed means one miracle has been proved, and then a second one, or saint, it means that there's a second miracle, and it's kind of more recognition for the universal church.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that Father Kapaun is in heaven.
We all see it. We don't say if he becomes a saint. It's when he becomes a saint. We just like to see it in our lifetimes.
I do think Father Kapaun will become a saint. I mean, I already think he is. And I think if you look around and ask most people, they realize, like, okay, if he's not up there, what chance do I stand?
Yeah, I think he'll be a saint. I'm thinking, if 1,000 times a day, 1,000 times over a lifetime, you learn to give of yourself, well, when it comes to that moment to die, you won't be afraid of this total gift of yourself. But I think he will become a saint.
O God, we ask of thee to give us the courage to be ever faithful to thee. Blessed are they who suffer persecution for justice' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. May the blessing of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit descend upon all of you. Amen.